Yeah, and to your point, I mean, that's why what PFF does with offensive linemen has been so eye-opening. And, I've had coaches say, my guy is an all-pro because of PFF.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. Love those guys. Use the code Ross on the Best Ball app or over at DK Sportsbook. Speaking of loving those guys, how about Shane McCormick? You are the winner this week of spreading the word via social media. All you had to do was quote post one of the posts from @RossTuckerPod on X, and bam, you get a signed press pass. Shane, just make sure you email me, ross@rosstucker.com, so I can send that thing to you. No sponsor confirmation email winner this week, because to be honest with you, we got so many people that entered for Best Ball, I can't even separate the Best Ball people from people that would want to just win a signed autograph or something. I can tell you the YouTube shout-out winner, youtube.com/RossTuckerNFL. You just subscribe and make any comment, then I know you're there. Andrew Raboin, I'm going to say, Raboin. The teaching and the tutorial today is coming from Matt Coller, who wrote an amazing book on multiple levels. Number one, detailing how analytics became so prolific in the NFL, as well as sort of how Pro Football Focus came to be, which is really, every team subscribes to it. So anyway, it's an awesome book, and I'm looking forward to you guys hearing some of the stories about something that 10 years ago wasn't really part of the NFL. Now it's become a much, much bigger deal. Smirnoff is the perfect vodka for crafting delicious cocktails that are easy to make and versatile for any and all fans over 21. It is the world's #1 vodka. It started in 1864, and it's an official vodka partner of the NFL. So grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer and head to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff #21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, well, so in the offseason in particular, I love having the opportunity to dive into some topics that we don't get a chance to dive into as much during the season because there's so much time-sensitive stuff and what's happening in the next game and all that stuff, which is why I wanted to bring on Matthew Coller. That you can check him out on social media at Matthew Coller. It's Coller, by the way, not AR. And as soon as I heard about your book, I was like, okay, I'm in. Because I enjoy talking about topics like this. It's called Football is a Numbers Game. And I know it's gotten a lot of attention, Matthew. I love, by the way, the cover with, is that my guy Zach Ertz?
It is, yep,
scored the touchdown against.
There's a story behind that.
Okay, scoring the touchdown for the Eagles in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, which I was there. My wife and sister-in-law were there, actually. And, growing up outside of Philadelphia, we're all big-time Eagles fans. So pretty cool to actually have an opportunity to see what the Eagles could do winning the Super Bowl. So, all right, let's start with that. Just tell me about, I'm going to give you a blank slate, Matthew, just to tell me about the book.
Yeah, so let me start with just this play on the cover here, which is Zach Ertz scoring the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl in 2017. So Pro Football Focus had an influence on this play. The Eagles coaching staff went into the Super Bowl looking for any little tiny advantages that they could get about the New England Patriots defense. And while they were in the hotel leading up to the Super Bowl, they were looking through PFF data and tape, because the system is combined together to look at the tape and the data. And they discovered that when you use a particular motion and formation, that the Patriots had given up several big plays against this motion that they were using. And so they thought, let's put in a couple of more plays just before the Super Bowl. And so that week's practice, they added it to the wristband for Nick Foles. And in the biggest moment, they decided to call that play. And so, that's one of the things that I think people don't understand about Pro Football Focus is what it actually does for teams. How do coaches use it? It's always coming up. Where do these grades come from? Does the NFL actually use their data? So forth. And I just kind of became fascinated by that because my day job is covering the Minnesota Vikings, and I would use their data all the time. And so I started to see this kind of analytics swell around PFF, but just in the league in general, people talking about analytics all the time. So I thought, where did this come from? Like, why is PFF the king? Why do they work with every team? Why do I use their data all the time? How do they get this data? They have everything, right? Not just the grades, but all sorts of numbers, pressures for offensive linemen and things like that. And so I contacted the founder, Neil Hornsby.
Right.
And the story that he told me was way more than an article. Normally, I might just write an article about it. But when he told me that he was from England and he was a random football fan and he just wanted to engage with football more and started writing down every play and then eventually built this into a company that works with every team, I was like, you know what? I got to tell this story in a longer form. And so what I found is the way that this analytics in general has permeated the league is super fascinating. And we're just at a tipping point right now where we're only starting to see the NFL adopt analytics. And it's been a long road for PFF that was started in the early 2000s to now have come all this way to have a ton of influence on how you and I view the game from the outside, but also inside the game is probably very different from when you played. And so it's a really fun project to work on. And I learned a lot more than I ever expected to. And also, you yourself slightly influenced this book. Do you want to know how?
I'm a little bit nervous about that when you say that, but yeah, sure, go for it.
Well, so I was listening to a PFF podcast with Eric Eager and George Shahuri, and you were on it. And I was listening to you talk about how the offensive line grades work and your perspective on the offensive line grades. And I remember you talking about that, and I expected you to be like, oh, yeah, you guys, you don't know what you, whatever.
Right.
And that was not how you approached it.
No, definitely not.
You approached it in such a different way. And I don't remember all the details of what you said, but it was very analytical in how they approach it and why you liked the grades. And I thought, this is interesting because a lot of players and former players do not like the grades, and they kind of like, well, they don't know when I'm supposed to work to the linebacker and things like that. So it's like, I'm starting to see people like yourself, even who play the game, interested in adopting these things. And I would love to even tell that story of the different viewpoints on the grades, because when you do something as epic as trying to grade every player on every play, what I discovered was there's a lot of different viewpoints on that. Like there was teams that very early on were super intrigued by it. And then there were a lot of people who did say, like, you guys can't grade us. What are you talking about? And they went through this period of like Neil Hornsby starts trying to grade plays. He doesn't know how to grade plays. But then once he starts putting it on the internet, people like yourself, offensive linemen, offensive line coaches, they start to reach out and say, this one grade was wrong, but let me help you get it right. And so he kind of went on this quest from the time that he started PFF to get it as right as possible. And now they have incredible layers of human beings who are grading these things. So it starts with one grader, but then they have a team of graders who cross-checks it, including former players. Bruce Gradkowski does the quarterback grade. Zach Robinson, who just got hired for the Atlanta Falcons, he also did the grading there for PFF and helped them understand how quarterbacks see coverages and things like that. Bobby Slowick was also involved in that as well, because they didn't really know when they started doing the grades, but then people like Bobby Slowick, Zach Robinson, Paul Alexander, who's an offensive line coach formerly with the Cincinnati Bengals, these guys started to help them form the grades, and they were trying to get the data more and more and more correct, to the point now where I think a lot of these grades are close or reflective to what they would be inside NFL buildings. And one GM told me that they like to use it as a comparative tool.
Yes.
If our offensive line coach has way different grades than PFF, they want to know why. They're not saying PFF is right and their coach is wrong, but they want to say, well, what's kind of being missed here?
Well, man, I mean, this could be like a 5-hour conversation, but the first thing I would say is that PFF, it's never going to be like 100% because it's impossible to always know on certain, I would say mainly the mental errors, who screwed up, right? Because it might look like the left guard missed the block on the defensive end, but really the left tackle kicked out to a guy he wasn't supposed to block. The running back had him, and the left guard saw this and was like, oh no, and tried to help save him. So, but what I would say is, like, over the course of a game or a season or whatever, there's not that many of those. And to your point about the comparative tool, one thing that players get frustrated about sometimes as well is that the subjectivity of coaches' grades, whether they say it or not. And I remember this specifically in college, there will be guys that the coach really likes and guys that maybe he doesn't like as much, and they could do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And the one guy would get a plus, the other guy would get a minus, and we'd be looking at each other like, wait, what? So I would say, the first thing I would say is I feel like in general, nobody's grades are 100% perfect, right? So when players are critical of PFF's grades, I think that's a little bit short-sighted because it's almost like they're coming at it from the perspective that their coaches' grades are never wrong, which is not true.
Right.
Now, do the coaches know what the player is supposed to do? Yes. Do the coaches know what they taught the player? Yeah, but even that, there will still be disagreements between an offensive lineman, and that's obviously my example, so whatever, between an offensive lineman and a coach in the meeting while they're watching the tape, being like, well, you told me this, though, on that. And the coach would be like, no, I didn't. And so you're never going to have, like, 100% certainty. But what I like about PFF, first of all, the data that they garner in terms of personnel groupings and all that stuff, everybody uses that. Everybody will use that. It's basically like outsourcing the time it would take to go through all those things, right? So that's like a no-brainer. The grading, while not perfect, I think is still pretty darn good overall. The thing I think is most interesting about it, Matthew, and I might have said this with George and Eric, is what I've always wondered, right? What people don't realize, and like you do the Vikings, okay? So let's say Brian O'Neill on at maybe, I don't know, out of, let's just say for easy numbers, 60 snaps in a game. Let's say he's a really good player. So let's say he had 58 pluses and 2 minuses, right? And then let's say Darrisaw's not quite as good, and he has 56 pluses and 4 minuses, right? What I think would surprise people is, like, the difference between, like, good and average and out of the league. It's really like a play or two per game.
Oh, yeah.
It's not what people think in terms of, now they might be more talented or whatever, they might look better doing it, but in terms of, like, the end result, did you accomplish what you needed to accomplish or not, it's not that different. What I've always wondered is the financial part of it.
Yeah.
Okay? Like, how much more are you willing to pay for Brian O'Neill, his 58 out of 60, as opposed to the guy behind him who might be 56 out of 60? What are those two plays? And the reality is, it depends on what happens on those two plays. You know what I mean?
Yep,
which you don't really know.
Yeah.
That's the tough thing to quantify, but that's what I've always wanted to get to is, like, okay, those plays, how much of a difference does that really make?
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, that's why what PFF does with offensive linemen has been so eye-opening. And, you know, I've had coaches say, my guy is an all-pro because of PFF, because people would not have realized how good this player was on a bad team, for example, because it is such small differences between, I mean, if you allow 1 pressure a game, you're a megastar. If you allow 2 pressures a game, you're pretty good.
Right.
If you allow 3, you're probably kind of bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's crazy how small the difference is. And even as a reporter at every single game, can I tell whether the right guard has allowed 1, 2, or 3 pressures per game while watching it and then go into the locker room? Like, no. So being able to quantify that for our understanding of offensive line play, I think over 1,000 plays, yes, there will be times where you're going to miss it and then they won't understand whose mental error it was. But over 1,000 plays, one guy is going to shine over another when it comes to those small details. I think that doesn't mean it's perfect. As to your point, like, what's the difference? I think what is super fascinating and what I discovered a lot of in my reporting is how important context is to everything. If you are a team with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, you might not pay your left tackle $30 million a year. If you have Kirk Cousins as your quarterback, you might want to pay every offensive lineman as much money as you can because he's a pocket quarterback. He's not going to escape. He's not going to be able to run away and extend plays. He's got to stay in the pocket. So I think of like New Orleans when they had that beast offensive line in front of Drew Brees late in his career. Like that was intentional and that was important because he wasn't going to escape and he needed a clean pocket. So every single situation is different. And this even goes for when there's grades. Sometimes one football player is actually better than another player, but doesn't grade as well. And then we need to ask why. Like, the grades are not the end of the conversation. They're the start of the conversation. To say, well, why didn't he grade as well? Was he playing next to somebody who was causing him to try to help that person too much? Was his role in over his head? Some guys, as you know, are good situational offensive linemen, but if you're going to play them 17 games, then you're probably not going to see them succeed. So how do you evaluate those small samples and grades and things like that as well?
The other flaw is what you just said, which is the context. Like, who are they going against?
Yeah.
Okay. And then how much are they helping him?
Right.
In other words, like, there were games when I started in Buffalo in 2004, for example, right, where I probably graded out really well. Well, part of that is because I was a left guard, and our right guard, Chris Valerio, was a really good one-on-one pass pro. So they would slide to me a lot. They would help me a lot. So, like, you know, you would never maybe see me give up a pressure, and maybe I grade really well, but my degree of difficulty was much less than Chris's.
Right.
If we flipped, it would have been bad. Like, I would have given up like a bunch of pressures. It would have been not good. So I think that's the thing, that what we're talking about here is it'll never be perfect, but man, it's such a better way to go about it. I guess here's my question. You said the system combines the tape and the data. I want you to expound upon that a little bit.
So in the early days of PFF, they first started they got the NFL's attention.
Do you work for PFF?
I do not. No.
Okay.
I'm just a reporter. So trust me, there are some people who are not all entirely thrilled about everything in the book, just because it's unbiased reporting.
God, okay.
But I am fascinated by analytics.
So in the book, Football is a Numbers Game, by Matthew Coller, you basically talk about the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses, and there's probably people at PFF or anywhere that might want have had it be only the positives.
Yes, that's correct. Now, one of the cool things, though, when I contacted Neil Hornsby, the founder of PFF, now Chris Collinsworth owns it now, but Neil Hornsby found it. He told me, I want you to write everything, like everything everybody says, positive or negative, which was unique because most people, if there's a book about them, they want it to be like shine me up. And so there were some things, especially on the business side as they grew and got bigger, that would maybe remind you of Succession a little bit at times, like little data analytics companies, Succession, but it's not that intense. But when it comes to the grades and things like that, there is criticism, of course, and there are people who have doubted them along the way. But when you're asking about, they started to develop through just player participation, who was on the field. And it's amazing that they did not have that information readily available to teams from the NFL when they started. And this wasn't as long ago as you would think. We're talking like 2007. And they still weren't even giving snap counts out to teams at that time until the end of the year. So that's how the New York Giants found that their information was accurate, and then brought them on board to tell them who was on the field for them and their opponents, so they could go back easier and watch the tape. So this inspired a decade later for them to create something called PFF Ultimate, which is all their data in every situation and way beyond what we have on the website. I mean, they have every single coverage that you're facing, every single route combination. So say you wanted to look at red zone. Why is our team struggling in the red zone? Well, you could look at, here's all the concepts we've used passing-wise in the red zone. Here's how opponents have played us with all of their coverages. And now, where is the gap? Let's go find it in the tape. And so they created this ultimate system where you can call up a situation and it will give you every single video clip of those plays
that's
to
awesome.
go along. Yes. So if you're saying like, hey, why hasn't our dagger worked at the 50-yard line on third down? Well, you can go find that. And that tool right there changed coaching really forever, because instead of having to watch every single play to find where you dialed up dagger, instead, now you could just go boop, boop, and you got it. So quality control people's jobs are a lot easier than they used to be able to find these things. But it also changed how coaches have to approach football. Like when we talk about, do coaches use data? Oh, they better. I mean, they have to. Now they have to understand how to use the data that's there and also to use the system to be able to make their jobs easier. Otherwise, they'd just be working through mountains of tape like they used to back in the day.
Check him out on social media at Matthew Coller, Coller. The book is called Football is a Numbers Game. Great talking with you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Awesome stuff from Matt. You know what's not awesome? Overpaying for wireless. You don't need to do it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plan and switch to Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile's here to rescue you and your squad with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/RTFP. That's mintmobile.com/RTFP. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/RTFP. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigabytes on an unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. You know what else you need to see? Your local store so you can get some delicious Labatt Blue Lights with your friends. Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy them responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross. Biggest news from yesterday. Patriots, they're going to trade edge rusher Matthew Judon to the Atlanta Falcons for a 3rd-round pick.
And I'm here, Jack. I'm in Foxborough right now. I've got the Patriots without Matthew Judon and the Eagles tonight on the Eagles broadcast. I don't think anybody can get it nationally, unfortunately. I think you'll have my guys, Scott Zolik and the McCarthy twins. But looking forward to it. Made sense. Patriots did not want to pay a 32-year-old guy coming off of an injury. Falcons could win that division, desperately need an edge rusher. I would suspect that Judon will have a new deal sooner rather than later.
The other big news, Vikings rookie quarterback J.J. McCarthy, he is officially out for the season after having surgery to repair a torn meniscus in his knee.
Just absolutely brutal, man. Absolutely brutal. I was getting excited after the way he performed, but especially after the way Greg was talking about him, right? I mean, Greg was really, really high on the improvement he had seen from J.J. McCarthy. He talked about the footwork, the excellent job the Vikings coaching staff was doing with him. And so I would imagine, he'll be the guy going into next year, but it's really unfortunate for his development that he's not going to get any games or playing time this year, or even just the practice time.
Couple of notes out of Cleveland. They signed linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to a 3-year, $39 million extension, $25 million that guaranteed, and their rookie 2nd-round pick Michael Hall, the defensive tackle, he was arrested after a domestic dispute.
Well, JOK, as they call him, is an awesome player. he's just fun to watch. He just brings a different speed and energy to that Cleveland defense. Still a little surprised he didn't go until round 2. People get a little skittish about undersized linebackers. And then the Michael Hall thing is interesting in the sense that the Cleveland media was kind of grilling Kevin Stefanski about this. I mean, he got arrested on Monday and was participating in the joint practice against the Vikings on Wednesday. You know, the Browns are going to let the legal process play out. I do wonder, I guess, a little bit about the commissioner's exempt list. We'll have to see how things ultimately unfold there. Have an awesome, awesome weekend, everybody. Check out the other shows. We'll be back bright and early Monday morning. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Listen, I know a lot of people have anniversaries coming up because for some unknown reason, a lot of people get married during football season. So if you know someone has an anniversary, myfrontpagestory.com. We also have backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.